As promised this morning, we're going to be covering the story of Chrystia Freeland deciding to disappear as soon as the BC ferry situation is starting to get a lot more tense. And the fact this budget is coming maybe in a month, 2, 3, who knows. We will be covering this whole situation, that even the fact that CBC is like, where is she going? This seems weird. BC Ferries, she was involved, had oversight over it of when this $1 billion was going to. Now she's just leaving to go be envoy to Ukraine. What's happening? Like, even the mainstream media is like, what the heck? We're going to be covering that story. And as well as Mark Carney's housing announcement is drawing the eye of many, mainly the way he set up the announcement. And people are wondering, oh man, is Mark Carney, again, just one big fugazi? We'll be talking about this and so much more. Welcome to the LV Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. If you're getting value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow and helps us to get to new audiences and helps people see that there's something different than what the mainstream media has to offer. Now, please, let's get into our first story, shall we? All right, let's get you up to speed of what's kind of currently been going on with BC Ferries. If you remember, we had an election last April, and the Liberals, gaslit Canadians to the nth degree, thinking that they were the decision to keep going forward with a new leader, new face, a focused government that completely has their eye on building Canada strong. That was about 5% of their campaign, and then the 95% was, hey, Donald Trump bad. Oh, he's scary. That was what their whole campaign was. But during these campaigns, they're saying, we got to build Canada strong. We need to use Canadian-made products. We need to buy Canadian. We need to do all the things Canadian. So during that time, there was a project that was being overseen in BC where they needed to build 4 new ferries in British Columbia. And this was a perfect opportunity. Build Canada strong. We could use Canadian steel. We have our own steel makers here that could make the boats. And BC Ferries got a $1 billion loan from a department that is overseen by the federal government, which they then took that $1 billion and sent for the construction across the Pacific to China. The CCP, a hostile nation to Canada, they decided, yeah, that's okay. That they hate us and they've been terrifying the crap out of us, but that's all right. We're going to allow them to build our ferries. Instead of us using our own industry to build the ferries, we sent them to China. The controversy around this is the fact that, Minister of Transport, Chrystia Freeland, said she didn't know about any of it. But then emails surfaced that showed 6 weeks prior to the decision that Freeland knew all about it. And now the Conservatives are in committee talking about this, and you have Dan Albus, who raises this issue after the announcement was made that Chrystia Freeland was stepping down as a transport minister and going to be an envoy to Ukraine, and this was his response to it.
Transport Canada was made aware of 6 weeks before that announcement, and they did nothing to protect Canadian jobs. They just sat on their hands and let it proceed. They didn't act to secure those contracts. They didn't push back at it. This raises a number of questions about former Minister Chrystia Freeland's abrupt resignation and blows a hole in her narrative that she wanted BC Ferries to buy Canadian and was dismayed and upset about it. She said these things on the floor of the House of Commons when myself and other members raised concerns about this procurement. So, Mr. Chair, we need to get to the bottom of this. Mr. Chair, this just reiterates the need to cancel this loan. $1 billion of taxpayer money that is going to a PRC shipyard. I am sick to my stomach that this is what the government has done.
And rightfully so, to be frustrated with a government who promised, build Canadian, use Canadian, we are all Canadian, Canada strong. But in the exact same breath, allowed for a $1 billion loan to be used to go buy ships to be built in China, be bought and brought over here. And Chrystia Freeland knew this, allegedly based on these emails. And then she turned around in the House of Commons, in the media, and as well as the House of Commons, said, I was shocked at this decision. This was terrible. I'm dismayed, were the exact words she used. And now Dan Albus is like, well, based on the evidence, you actually knew about this long before, and you were just playing victim to make yourself look like you care about Canada. So Vancouver Sun dropped an article about this as well. Chrystia Freeland is being called back to testify on BC Ferries' deal with Chinese shipyard. House committees are saying, not so fast. You don't get to just disappear on us. We need to find out and get to the bottom of this exactly, and you're going to come and testify and tell us exactly what happened. The House of Commons Transport Committee unanimously passed the motion to have Freeland testify. The Globe and Mail reported on emails between BC Ferries CEO Nicholas Jimenez and Transport Canada Deputy Minister Arun Thangaraj. Freeland had criticized the ferry deal after it became public in June, saying she was dismayed by the BC Ferries' decision to buy from state-owned China merchant industry Waihei shipyards. The Canada Infrastructure Bank, a Crown Corporation, lent BC Ferries $1 billion to finance the purchase. But the Globe said it obtained an April 29th email from Jimenez outlining the potential issues, including national security concerns if BC Ferries went ahead with the plan. In a subsequent email in June, Jimenez wrote to Tangaj that he was troubled by Freeland's reaction despite my confidential heads up to you 6 weeks prior to the public rollout of our decision. A statement from BC Ferries said it would not be sharing the documents publicly and didn't have anything further to add, but it referred the Canadian press to the article in the Globe and Mail. The Transport Committee motion passed Thursday calls for Freeland, other officials, and representatives for Canadian shipyards to be part of additional meetings. Evidence shows that Chrystia Freeland knew a lot about this and then played actress. Say, oh, that was shocking. Didn't see that coming at all. So this is the story. This is what broke yesterday. People want to know answers. Again, as I said, the government that just 5 months prior said, build Canada, build strong. We love you, Canada. We are all Canadian. Yeah, ooh, we have to fight for our sovereignty. You know, all that BS that they threw at us? Yes. First chance they get. I guess that sovereignty don't mean a whole lot. And now she's going to be brought in front of committee to testify. The reason why I'm harping on the details of this so much is because, well, Leslyn Lewis stood up in the House of Commons yesterday to call out the Liberals on this. And Liberals are doing exactly what you'd expect them to do. Not answer the question, gaslight, deny, deflect, and not take any accountability for their horrendous actions.
Misled. New emails show that BC Ferries warned the former Minister of Transport's officials 6 weeks before announcing that the ferries would be built in China. Wow. Yet, the minister stood in this House of Commons and claimed that she was blindsided. At the same time, her staff was working with the Prime Minister's office on how to spin this billion-dollar deal. Wow. Canadians just want to know the truth. Why did the Liberals ship Canadian tax dollars and jobs straight to China?
The Honourable Minister for Housing and Infrastructure.
Again, I don't know why this is so confusing for the members opposite. Right. This is a BC Ferries procurement. BC Ferries makes decisions about where they buy their ships, and that decision rests with those at BC Ferries. Mr. Speaker, we can do our part to invest in Canadian jobs, Canadian workers. We are focused on a Buy Canada strategy, and we will deliver for Canadian workers.
As I said, the gaslighting. We've told you this time and time again. This wasn't a government decision. This was a BC Ferries decision. Man, you guys stink. Seriously, that's all I got for that. On a feel-good Friday, that's all I got for you. These guys stink. Again, the shifting of blame. We didn't know anything about it. It was a BC Ferries decision, even though your federal minister, Minister of Transport, whose ministry oversees the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, who gives out these loans, knew about the loan, okayed the loan, allowed it to go. Then when they got caught, said, oh, shoot. It sucked to see it, man. I didn't know anything about it. My bad. Oh, it's so fake. It's all theater at this point. And this is why Canadians are getting frustrated, understandably so, because these House of Commons things happen. These committee meetings happen. The truth is exposed in these meetings. The truth is exposed in the House of Commons, and nothing happens because the problem is the only people that are engaged are the people who watch these shows like this. And then CBC kind of goes out and spins something else out there. The Liberals get out there and spin something else out there. But the rest of the public kind of just eats up. That's why we as Conservatives have to start thinking a little more strategically about how we show what is happening behind the scenes. And that is on people like me to figure that out. And I'm going to be on that, working on that myself. Because this is so incredibly egregious, and the fact that they keep getting away with it is disgusting. But even the likes of CBC were like, Freeland's leaving. That's kind of weird. Andrew Coyne, you know all about him. He even thought it was a little odd.
But while we're being cynical, I can't help noticing the timing. Maybe it's coincidental. But Ms. Freeland leaving right after it's revealed that she may have misled Parliament, inadvertently or otherwise, in the matter of the BC Ferries contract, where she told the House that the federal government had no involvement in it, even as Liberal officials were meeting behind closed doors, discussing how they could spin a $1 billion loan for the purchase from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So maybe that's coincidental, but it's awfully interesting. We've got committees clamoring for her to appear and explain herself on this, so maybe a good time to get out of Dodge.
But even Andrew Coyne's just like, yeah, this is kind of odd, man. And he's a lefty. And the Liberals continue to try and mislead Parliament, as we saw with Gregor Robertson there yesterday in front of Leslyn Lewis. They will continue to lie, and deflect. And on that same note of lie and deflection, Mark Carney made an announcement earlier in the week about Canada Homes. This Canadian government is investing money in modular homes to get more homes built faster, and he did a whole press conference on it earlier this week.
But in Nepean, it is the proud home to Kaiven, one of Canada's most successful developers, manufacturers, and home builders. It's one of a new breed that are driving a Canadian industrial revolution in home building, one we need. Kaiven is scaling up their plant from around 6 homes per day present to 38 per day by the end of the year. That is 10,000 homes a year built in their factory in Nepean. The 2 sets of homes behind me were manufactured in 2 days, assembled on site in 1. We kept the townhouses. We wanted to keep the townhouses open. We held back the workers from finishing it so you could see how things fit together, how the computer design fits together and tailors the structure. The one over there is being shipped to Nunavut, and I'll speak more about that project in a moment.
So you see, this was him making an announcement about these modular home building that's going to be happening in Nepean. They're going to be building these homes in these factories and trying to get these pumped out to locations across the country. He made a point. That one behind him that was off screen is going to be going up to Nunavut. But you get the idea. He was speaking here about how we're building modular homes, shipping them to these building sites, and getting them put together on site. He says these homes are built in 2 days, put together on site within 1 day, is what he had to say. And there was some controversy around this announcement, mainly because not so much the announcement itself, even though people are just like, yeah, wonder who's invested in this modular home builder, but we'll leave it at that. But people were kind of confused because people went to the site after this announcement and found that there was nothing actually there. You had Barbara Ball, who was running against Mark Carney in this riding in the last election, and this is what she discovered. We'll play this. She has music on the background, so I have to actually leave this on mute, so hopefully you can read the captions. But virtually, she went and rode up to the location and where Mark Carney did this announcement, and then realized that there was nothing actually there when she showed up. But also, there's photos of the press conference, and you see there's these buildings and homes behind him, framing and all, which again was earlier this week. And then he showed up later this week, and there's just bulldozers and excavation equipment. Peter's like, oh, that's kind of odd. And again, this is where the obfuscation happens, right? Because Mark Carney's not technically wrong. He did talk about how they're moving buildings around and how he kind of alluded to that these buildings were actually going to be temporarily on spot. But it takes a little bit of like, you're kind of looking at abstract art and you're kind of squinting a little bit. It's like, yeah, I guess he technically wasn't lying, but the way they're presenting it, they intended it to be taken a specific way. And it was clear the way it was presented. It was clear the way it was talked about. It was clear the way that it was brought to the public that those buildings were progress. Those buildings will be staying there. Those buildings were assembled in 1 day on site, as he said. Now, people are just like, wait, hold a second. We go to the location and there's nothing there now. What's going on? What was that all about? Were these homes just for show? Were these homes just for the photo op? Were these homes just so that you could cut a ribbon on something? And this is how Mark Carney and liberals right now operate, especially this current government, is they'll turn around and be like, oh, I told you they're modular homes. I told you that you kind of move them around and we'll be moving them to different locations. I even told you that one off screen. That one was going to Nunavut. I'm sorry that you assumed that these houses were staying on this location. I just wanted to show you what they were like. That's how Mark Carney comes back. Again, they present it one way to get people to assume something is happening. And then when that gets called out, they'll come back and say, whoa, I told you. I actually did tell you that X, Y, and Z, this is how it was working. This is manipulation at its finest. This is how politicians work. This is how the media works in deceptive ways. And then they turn around and gaslight you and say that you're the crazy one thinking that there was buildings on this location when there clearly wasn't now. And that's why I wanted to cover the story, because it was a little weird. It's a little odd. It's easy to kind of go off like, well, he lied. And it's like, ugh. That's why I want to attack this from different perspectives and try to hit the nuance. Because if you just come out and say, well, he lied, when the twist comes and the spin happens, well, then, as you said, the people that follow the Liberal Party are going to be like, well, yeah, you guys are blowing this out of proportion. Clearly, he specified that that wasn't going to be a permanent structure, even though those exact people who would defend Carney definitely thought that those were permanent structures. You know what I mean? It's really odd. And I think it does need to be called out because it does look really bad. Look at all the structures and framing that's here. And then it just goes away. Nothing's being built there. Oh, we just want to show how it all works. Okay, rather odd. But that's your Friday update. Hope you have a good weekend. Enjoy your time tonight. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.